ZZ Cool TV. Come on, get in, get your ice water, whatever you're drinking, pull up your chair, or you chilling in your car, which is fine too. Just come on in and get ready to enjoy the show. Oh, wow, it's Thursday, almost to the weekend once again, and which is wonderful. And I'm looking so forward to the weekend. Hopefully, we'll get a chance to get out and enjoy some water this weekend. Weather's supposed to be a little dicey, but we persevere. We work through it. So this evening, I have via his car today, uh, the amazing Don Swindell. Don, how are you today?
What you're saying about the weather, I discovered today that there are four seasons in Michigan: Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's like a different season. Okay?
Yes, I was gonna say, weather-wise, it's like 7 or 8. We can get those in like 2 days. So how are you today?
I'm okay. Throat's a little scratchy. Seems to be some pollen in the air, but oh well, that's part of Michigan.
Yes, yes, yes. Well, gosh, if anybody knows and remembers the name Don Swindell, and I was looking at your bio a little earlier, I'm like, okay, yeah, I remember that name from radio back in the day.
No, you can't be that old.
Oh, no, no, it's like 10 years ago. So,
Constantly bump into people. Yeah, I think my grandfather listened to you.
oh, well, no, because see, I used to listen to, DFN sometimes, and that was the tomboy in me that would tune in and just to check up on the sports and
Oh yeah, well, I was the guy that did all the crazy tunes and the Stony and Wojo jingle and all that stuff.
yes, absolutely.
And the silly, most of the silly voices on the squares. So that
Okay.
that was a fun gig because I wasn't limited musically. We
Mhm.
didn't have there was no official music. I remember we did a Miles Davis Friday once,
Oh, I can only imagine how awesome that was.
but it was one of those things where I could combine all the voices I did with the instruments I played. With I combined the music with the entertainment thing with a certain amount of sports.
Right.
uh,
So yeah, so how did you get into radio? Kind of what was your entry into the radio business?
I kid you not. I started out as just a musician, not just a musician, but I was trying to make a living as a musician.
Hmm.
And I had just finished a week of remember a place called DB's. It was like a nightclub. It was part of the Hyatt Regency.
Ah, okay, got you.
And I had just done a week of the Patty Page show. Yeah, and I'm in the trumpet section, and she's doing her medley of hits. And there's a spot where the trumpets are supposed to go arf arf in the middle of that doggy in the window.
Yeah,
And I'm thinking, yeah, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can put up with this for the rest of my life.
yeah.
You don't get that many jazz quintet gigs.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
and the next morning, I was at a house of pancakes with the girl I was engaged to.
Uh-huh.
And I'm telling jokes and doing a few voices. And the guy in the next booth was the morning guy at Riff.
Ah, okay. Hmm.
And he talked to me on his way out. And I wrote him a bunch of stuff Monday morning and did a few voice routines over the phone. And by the end of the week, I was producing the morning show at Riff. That's how I got into radio.
Wow.
I just happened to be at a house of pancakes one morning.
Darn. Okay, I'm gonna have to go hang out at the House of Pancakes now.
Yeah, well, it was the original house of pancakes in Southfield. Yes.
Oh, okay. They're still there.
You know, they had just opened that year in
Wow.
Southfield. So.
Okay.
Because I remember when I took a full-time job in Flint, so I
Uh-huh.
could get my hands on equipment. Because at Riff, I couldn't, because of the unions, I couldn't touch anything.
Hmm.
And I wanted to be able to do my own show. So, a few months later, I got this job. I was still doing I was still doing bits in Detroit and doing the same bits in Flint. And people would call me up and accuse me of stealing from me.
Oh boy.
I said, well, where'd you hear it first? Well, I heard it first on this station. Well, then am I also psychic so I can predict what they're about to do? It's the same guy.
Right. Oh
But
boy.
I've had a quirky career. I mean, I went from Detroit to Flint in a few months, still worked for Detroit while I was in Flint. And then 11 months later, I got a job in Chicago. So
Oh,
I never really went through the minor leagues.
okay, got you. Yeah, and I
So
see. Yeah, it looks like you did some radio in Tampa as well.
I did a morning show at a chainsaw rock station. You know, would open your morning with AC/DC.
Oh, that would be a great alarm clock.
Well, it didn't matter to me. I mean, because I was able to be totally wild down there.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, and that my next stop after that was JZZ.
Okay. Yeah.
And I got that gig. Dorian Pastor was the program director at the time, and I
Mhm.
was part of a band that got a. They didn't call them Metro Music Awards back then. They called Motor City Music Awards. It was just, I think it
Uh-huh.
was just the what's the name of that paper? I'm having a moment here.
Which one? Michigan
Not
Chronicle?
Metro Times. It was the Metro Times.
Oh, Metro Times. Okay.
You
Uh-huh.
know, and I mentioned to him he was a presenter, and on the way off the stage, at the presentation, I mentioned to him that I'd done a few years of radio. So he said, "Come down and see me on Monday," and then I got the job at JCC.
Fantastic.
That lasted about 6, 7 years.
Wonderful. So yeah, so let's kind of talk about WJZZ. I know it's, had been gone kind of off of terrestrial, radio, for a while. I kind of heard the big companies kind of, bought them out, so to speak.
Well, it really didn't. It really didn't go down that way, though.
Okay.
I mean, I was the last of the format that played a lot of mainstream along with the commercial stuff.
Okay.
It was about a 50-50. I wouldn't call it really wasn't much in smooth jazz. It was a combination of mainstream jazz and a lot of fusion kind of things.
Hmm.
A little more electrified, a little funkier than what you would get on the smooth jazz station.
Right.
A lot more energy. And then they tried to do. They didn't call it smooth jazz. They called back then. I think they called it Quiet Fire or something like that. It was the name for that format.
Quiet Storm, probably.
Quiet Storm.
Yeah.
Yeah, excuse me. See, it's been a while. um, and I took a job doing mornings in Cincinnati,
Hmm.
and but I that was they actually got farther and farther away from what they were known for. And what happens sometimes if you like the smooth jazz thing worked, but if you're slightly successful with something that commercial, a corporation that has a lot more money is going to find a way to do it better and promote it a lot better.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, because I can remember, when it went off air and it was just, I don't know, it was just kind of almost kind of losing a family member.
Well,
Um,
yeah, they sold it is what happened.
yeah.
But yeah, I never got rich there.
Mhm.
But also made it very easy for me to play jazz gigs.
Right.
And I also ended up doing. You remember the Saturday Night Music Machine, the sound of today's Detroit?
Yes.
I was the voiceover guy on that, and I got that. I got a call one morning when I spent the first up until the last 2 years I did mornings, and then I switched to afternoons, which is the dream shift of a musician because you don't have to be up till the afternoon.
Yep.
And that's back when gigs lasted till 2 a.m.
Hmm.
But it's like I'd come in there in the morning sometime. I'd bring a horn with me and on a long tune, and I get some practice in.
Fantastic.
I learned a lot of tunes, and talk about meeting so many jazz greats I got to meet because of that job.
Hmm. Yeah, because I actually dated one of the voices on JZZ. I think he signed the station off back then. I mean, just the knowledge of music, that's come from, the DJ.
No names?
Huh?
Any names?
I'll tell you later.
Okay, that's fine. well, let's just say, is he somebody that I crossed paths with?
Well, no, I can tell you the name is Don Allen.
No, I did not know him.
And I think that was probably after you left, because I want to say he was there like in the 90s.
Yeah, by that time. Well, I took a 4-year break and played. I just was a musician for 4 years, playing I played with a guy named Larry Nazaro, who's a great saxophone woodwind player out of Detroit.
Oh, okay.
Legendary guy. I probably the youngest of the Funk Brothers.
Wow. Oh God. Yeah, those guys were the Funk Brothers were amazing.
Well, yeah, but if you're a jazz musician in Detroit, you cross paths with all of them. I played with most of those guys over the years.
Right.
And I would have been too young to be part of that because by the time I was old enough to get in kind of gigs,
Hmm.
or they'd already moved.
Oh, got you.
But
Okay.
but
Yeah.
but I got to know a lot of those guys, and they're
Right.
most of the funk. They were basically jazz musicians, and
Hmm.
I remember you remember Richard Allen, Distal Allen, drummer.
Yes. Hmm.
My favorite quote of his was, "I did Baby Love for $8 a record."
Wow.
Those guys did not get rich doing that. In fact, it took them years to get credited.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, there were some issues, with the Funk Brothers, getting the credit, that they deserve, and I'm finding that with a lot of, musicians, they don't get the credit, that they deserve when they, record a record and
Right.
everything. So, kind of how do you, I guess, kind of circumvent something like that?
It's really hard. It's and now, of course, there are issues over streaming.
Yes.
That sometimes they don't get paid for their streaming right.
Hmm.
Um, it's hard to find good agents, agents that actually work for you, as opposed to, the kind of agents I've always bumped into is I supply the headshot, I supply the background, and what do? They occasionally get me on an audition, and they collect a percentage.
Okay.
And there are good agents. I mean, I don't want to get into that, but
Okay.
it's but musicians, it's I don't know how things work now that everything's online.
Right.
It's a lot easier to keep track of things when things were, either vinyl or CDs. You could get an idea. You knew what your sales were.
Right. Hmm.
Um, it's now I guess all the money's still in touring.
Yeah, it is. I mean, because I'm a booking agent, actually licensed booking agent, through American Federation of Musicians, and I'm
Right.
also a member of the Detroit Federation of Musicians, Local 5.
Right.
And, a lot of the artists I work with, in Detroit, work with Gaylen McKinney and Ralph Armstrong.
Well,
And
I love them both. They're great people.
yeah, and Gaylen is the one that kind of got me into the music business because I had an event planning business. And
Right.
always the drummer's always the last one to leave with the event planner. So we talked, and here I am. And but yeah, I want to touch a little bit on the the booking agent side of things. I read different things where musicians don't need a manager, don't need a booking agent. I guess, what, in your opinion, kind of what makes a good and a successful booking agent? What are some of the things that maybe some upcoming artists need to look for, certain questions to ask, and in terms of driving their career?
Well, the biggest thing is honesty.
Hmm.
You've got to be able to trust the person in charge of your career. You need someone because my opinion is always, if you produce yourself, you have an idiot for a producer. If you're your own agent, chances are you have an idiot for an agent.
Hmm.
It's very hard to be an artist and have half of your head in business all the time.
Correct. Hmm.
One's right brain, the other one's mostly left brain,
Right. Exactly.
and it doesn't. You can do one or the other, but doing both at the same time, it's counterproductive. I don't think there are rare exceptions, but it's hard to get anywhere without someone dedicated to the business side.
Hmm. Right. It's a crazy business. I'm finding that out. Just a few years that I've been in the music business, and it's like, why am I doing this? Then I'm like, because I love it. Because it's so crazy and it's so different. It's nothing remotely like my 9 to 5. and everything, so that's why I guess I'm drawn to it, because it is kind of crazy and chaotic. So, you know, and, and I talk to, artists, all the time, where they have, horror stories, that they've been, ripped off financially, promised, concerts that never happened. And, they've paid money, out of their pocket. And of course, this person is gone, or if they are still around, they're still doing the same thing, to different people, and then I think that just kind of, gives a bad name, to the honest ones that are in the business.
Right. It's, you know, if you're trying to find an agent, you really have to sit down with your prospective agent and ask simple questions like, okay, what is my next step? Well, not, don't tell me about you're going to get me on American Idol in 6 months.
Right. Hmm.
You know, you have to get the stars out of your eyes, and you got to go, okay, how are you going to build a career? What's your idea?
Hmm.
And if it sounds reasonable, if it makes sense, you're on the road. You're on the road to right, you know.
Hmm. Hmm.
But if it's nothing but glittering, you know, just sort of all sorts of blown up superlatives, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
there's probably something a little fishy going on.
Right. Absolutely. So yeah, so everybody, you're watching Jazz Cats on WJZZ Cool TV. Please stream us. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, and other top social media platforms. Like, follow, share, comment, and most of all, subscribe. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And if you're just tuning in, I have via remote Don Swindell. And, we're just kind of talking about some of everything. So now, kind of, what are you doing musically now? Or are you still,
I'm no, I'm
playing?
playing. It's just I'm not doing much with my band right now. Uh,
Okay.
well, and we had one. We play all over, but we had this. We've been doing the second Thursday of every month in Nicolas for the last 13, 14 years in Southfield,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they haven't brought the music back yet. I don't. In fact, I need to stop by there and see how the business is going. But that's the biggest struggle we all have right now because the landscape has changed.
Mm-hmm.
Most of well, you're not going to get gigs from corporate restaurants. They're
Right.
all like family owned, mom and pop kind of joints, and they're the ones that got hit the hardest during this.
Yes, absolutely.
Jazz clubs don't have drive through windows. You
No,
know,
they don't. No, they don't. That would be a very odd concept.
I know we're supposed to go into the at some point back into the Blue Llama in Ann Arbor because we were booked in there on April 26th. Unfortunately, the last time they had to shut down was like the 24th. So
Right.
I just haven't worked that out yet. But I'm dying to get my band going again. I'm living up in Davison right now.
Oh, are you? Okay.
So I have gigs up here, but it's not really my band.
Gotcha.
In fact, I'm doing well about 2/3 of my playing these days up here is on blues harp.
Really? Okay.
Well, I've been a blues harmonica player, but a jazz trumpet player.
So how do those two kind of work
It
together? What kind of
works,
marriage is that?
works fine. Well, because I write a few blues tunes. Like they're kind of entertaining. People like them. There's really you can play, and you don't just play jazz blues. You can play blues with a jazz group,
Yes.
and people love it. It does. They don't see the line between those.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, most listeners don't really see all those lines that we people in radio have to
Right.
go.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
It's where are you going to go here? On a regular basis? Just mainstream jazz. I mean, not just the soft stuff that some people play. I'm not talking about smooth jazz. I'm talking about just mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you don't hear a whole lot of like horn quintets, like Horace Silver, Art Blakey, that kind of stuff. There's nowhere on the radio to hear that.
Right.
Occasionally on public radio, but the public radio stations don't play that much jazz anymore.
No, and I mean, why do you, think that is? Is that you think it's a change in, what people are listening to, or is it just music that is not super popular to the masses?
Well, it's not as popular as it used to be, but I remember in the old days of WJZZ,
Hmm.
we had the ratings. In fact, there used to be a thing called I think it's still there, the Scarborough ratings. It
Okay.
breaks things down by psychographic groups. In other words, people with the most amount of disposable income. It breaks down the audience not just by age. And at the time when we were playing half mainstream, we were tied with the classical station WQRS is having the audience with the most amount of disposable income,
Right.
which
Hmm.
would lend. So if you're selling it, you would think that you would sell it to like upper end things, Mercedes dealerships, things like that.
Sure.
And I think they were kind of, don't quote me on it, but I think they were leaning towards being like hip urban, whereas really we should have been selling top shelf stuff.
Sure. Hmm.
Not sure that would have worked. It might have, but because the bottom line is not ratings. The bottom line is sales.
Absolutely. Yes.
I'm gonna have low. When I was at WDFN, we didn't have much in the way of ratings, but boy, do we sell stuff, and people showed up, and that station made a ton of money.
Hmm.
Did not have really ever have really high ratings.
Right. I mean,
They,
but you guys had a fan base though that that tuned in.
well,
Yeah.
yeah, but I used to get calls. I used to get request calls from Mayor Young's office.
Hmm.
I got a call from Lee Iacocca on his way to work one day. Another one from Donald Peterson, who I think was over at GM at the time. We we had a lot of prominent people
Hmm.
that listened, that listened to me in the mornings and to the station.
Hmm.
Um, there's Joe Muir, his son Hans, is a
Oh.
drummer.
Hmm.
He told me he got into jazz because his dad would have me on in the mornings when he was getting ready for work and the kid was getting ready for school.
Wow.
Now, when I was on I had really respectable ratings.
Hmm.
I was competitive. And I rarely used the word jazz. I'd call it music. And I would not read liner notes or long bios. I treat it like it was anything else.
Huh.
Just like a rock jock might, not exactly like a rock jock, but basically I talk about the same stuff that other people were talking about. So a lot of times kids would call me up because they would say, "Man, I've been listening to you because you play Jean-Luc Ponty," and yeah, but who's this John Coltrane guy?
Oh, okay. Hmm.
And I said, "Oh," and they want to know where they could hear him. I said, "Well, he passed away like 25 years ago." And
Right.
but the thing was, the kid was excited because all of a sudden he's hearing something he's never heard before.
Hmm. Hmm.
And if you don't tell them it's jazz, they don't get intimidated by it.
Exactly, because I know when I was growing up, my dad would always listen to it in the car. I must have been maybe 8 or 10, 12 years old, and he would listen to WJZZ, and of course, as a kid, I called it old people music, because I would want him, to turn it to, the what they used to call like the booty shaking stations back then,
Right.
and you know, and and I guess as a kid it was kind of like sheer torture, just listening to jazz because most of the time it was just horns or piano, or something like or the bass, and I'm like, where are the words? Nobody is singing.
Well, we would do about half of what we played were vocals. There was a format. It just was.
Mhm.
There were just ton, but what our library was really deep.
Nice.
You
Okay.
didn't hear a lot of repetition.
Yeah, I was glad you said that because segueing to that. I mean, I know it's changed. It's, it's about the dollars and things like that. How, in your mind or in your opinion, how do we get other like PDs to stop playing like the same 10 songs in maybe like a 20-minute period? I know it's an exaggeration, but that's what it sounds like.
Well, yeah, I used to say that some stations say that they got a 24-hour no repeat policy, but that doesn't mean 25 hours. You know, but my philosophy has always been
Hmm.
the older the music is, the deeper your library better be. I
Yeah.
mean, it's nice to hear something you haven't heard in 30 years,
Hmm.
but you don't want to hear it 4 times in the same week.
Correct. Or in
Be-
the same hour.
because, like I say, the older it is, if you're playing an artist that was popular 30 years ago, then you probably should play a ton of their stuff, just not, every time you play them, you should play something different
Exactly.
because those same 3 top hits are going to get old really
Yeah,
fast.
yeah, they're gonna get old very quickly, and because off and on I listen to terrestrial radio, and most of the time I just listen to the music, in my library on my phone. Um, and like now, I mean, I'm seeing a shift in, I guess how music is sounding now, because of the technology behind it. How do you think we should preserve, like mainstream jazz?
Well, you're talking about the technology. I think you're referring to mostly what they call the loudness wars,
Hmm.
where they use so much compression on the tracks that it's like there are no highs or lows. It's all one big loud bar. If you were to look at the meter on it, the meter wouldn't move. It would just sort of sit there and quiver instead of having any range between soft and loud. Because the whole philosophy with like rock radio was always the sound is to be the loudest station on that band,
Yes.
and that takes away all the nuances and also makes your ears tired pretty quick. But in fact, there are some famous producers that with some of these rock bands, they will, well, commercial bands, they will they'll produce the album, but if in certain cases, if they're asked to play the loudness wars game where everything is just totally compressed,
Hmm.
they'll do it, but they request that their name not be used on the album.
Okay. I'm kind of looking at some chat questions coming in. Tamara Yates is asking, would you still encourage young people starting out in music to pursue the traditional jazz genre?
Oh yeah,
Hmm.
the practice period of any kind of jazz you get into is the bebop era.
Hmm.
You may not end up being a bebop player; it's a little dated at this point anyway. But it's like for symphonic players, it's the classical era. It's anything around Bach and Beethoven. That's where you learn the language for classical people.
Hmm.
For jazz, it's the bebop era. It's anything but starting with Charlie Parker, going through Miles Davis, Lee Morgan, those kind of people,
Hmm.
and then you can take it from there.
Hmm.
Um, you don't start playing free until you learn how to play within the rules.
And what are the rules?
Well, the rules are playing within the chord structure,
Hmm.
playing the right modes to the right chords, and then you learn how to violate that.
Gotcha.
But it's hard to break the rules unless you know what the rules you're breaking are.
And I guess, how would a young musician learn that?
Well, for one thing, you got to do a lot of listening.
Hmm.
You got to, the old way before all the college music programs came along was, kids would get a record and they would write down the solos. They transcribe the solos off the record. That's partially one of the big ways they would learn. A lot of it is also having older people to sit in with, which that scene's gone now. Not totally, but there used to be a place. We'd go to play a wedding gig on the weekend, but after the gig's over, you go down to the Rappa House and sit in all night. But and there was always older guys that would, basically say, "You don't know,"
Right.
and
Yeah.
they'd give me a hard time, and then, I think a lot of it was to see if I'd come back the next week and learn that tune I didn't know.
Hmm. Well, I mean, Bert's in the Eastern Market. They do a jam session.
Well, Bert's is,
Yeah, every Friday, and that's actually how I got to know, a lot of the younger musicians.
well,
Between going to Bert's and going to Baker's, and these young cats would have a show on a Sunday, and so a lot of the more, seasoned, musicians would kind of take them under their wing.
well, yeah, and musicians will still do that. It just you don't get the opportunity much anymore.
Hmm.
You don't have. I remember when I was a kid, when I was in high school. I don't know where I told my mother I was going, but I'd go in the city somewhere and just sit in wherever I could.
Hmm.
It was basically, I learned to fly by the seat of my pants and by sneaking in bars.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, by the time I took jazz in school, I mean, I'd already picked up a sound.
Wow.
But it was different. I mean, we're talking, and I was the tail end of that, and that would have been like late '60s, early '70s,
Got you. Okay.
and
Mhm.
somewhere in the '70s, right about the time I got into my 20s, jazz was pretty much declared dead. It went through a real lull in the '70s.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, and I read still today, that it's a dying, art form, and I always get extremely upset, when I, read a story like that. Um, I mean, because I guess I see it all the time. I live it, eat, sleep, and drink it. What do you think? How do you
Uh,
take that statement?
I have an opinion. I don't know how valid it is, but I think there's a good and a bad thing to college jazz programs. Um, what I notice with a lot of young players is they play a lot of notes. The notes are right, everything's theoretically correct, but I don't hear that in the gut feeling. You know what I mean? And in a lot of ways, jazz musicians have lost their message. There used to be a hook in between sociological things. What's going on around you. Your music affected by your lifestyle, your life, your environment, what you hear on the streets. Maybe some song you heard a bird up in a tree sing.
Right. Sure.
Everything comes in. You're feeling it. It's a language of the heart that you don't have to have words for.
Hmm.
And it's not just about playing a lot of notes, and they might be impressive, and maybe you're playing a lot of substitute changes, and it's the kind of stuff that impresses other musicians more than it gets into the gut of your audience.
Right, and that cannot be taught in any program.
Well, yeah, it needs to be, they need to be put together. I think at Wayne State they do a good job of that.
Okay. Hmm.
And it also helps that Wayne is in an urban environment,
Absolutely.
not
Yeah.
as antiseptic. They do a really good job at Wayne State. Not to knock U of M, but I know more about what's going on at Wayne.
Oh.
Um,
Hmm.
I went to Indiana for a while, but
Yes.
I took from David Baker. But after a year with him, he just said, you better off just going to New York. You can't with the sound. I'm not going to be able to teach you that much.
Okay.
You know,
Hmm.
but I really needed some of that theory. I would. I never got into. I never learned enough on piano. There's so many things that went through my head that I could have written had I been able to sit behind the piano and write it down.
Okay. Hmm.
But I still managed to do it. But
Right.
but there's a real need. You have to connect with your audience,
Hmm.
and also we need to have a message. Not everybody has to have the same message, but with what's going on in the world right now,
Hmm.
in
Right.
in this country right now, you know, there needs to be more freedom now suites, and free cell block me, tis Nazi USA, and like the stuff Mingus used to do. There used to be a a political and sociological involvement,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
dealing with, it was always tied in with the struggle,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know, and I think we've lost that connection. I know that many musicians in Detroit are as committed as they've always been,
Mm-hmm.
but the music as a whole, the way it's marketed in this country, everybody's looking for the new slick player. When actually, I had some. I'm not going to say which label, but back in the day, I was kind of, because I used to talk to a lot of the national record reps, um, and one of them told me that, because I was promoting a few older Detroiters like Marcus and people like that,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and they said, well, we're looking for anybody over 25. We're not looking for. I'm like, your cutoff age is 25.
Yeah, and I mean they're missing, so much talent, at if that's that was their mindset. And because like now kind of hanging out at like Birds or Bakers, and I mean some of these are like teenagers,
Right.
that are, coming in kind of blowing the roof off.
Yeah, but can they play a ballad?
Well, they may be able to, but they're not going to do it at Birds or Bakers. So that kind of format, they want to show, their jazz chops. They're not
Well,
gonna
yeah.
play a ballad.
Well, back in the day, I remember I played in Baker's quite a bit at one stretch,
Hmm.
and we played a lot of ballads. But maybe it's changed since then. I don't know.
Well, I mean, from what I'm seeing, it's 'cause Ralph Armstrong and Gay Lynn, they play there every Friday and Saturday, and because of both of their histories, especially Ralph, they'll play some fusion.
Well, that's okay. I mean, Ralph's a wonderful player, man. I love anything Ralph plays.
Yeah, they'll it's a mix, of what they play.
Yeah, but Ralph plays with feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
Doesn't matter what he plays,
Yeah.
you're gonna feel Ralph in that.
Yes, and I mean, and some of the younger musicians, and I see and feel their passion when they're playing. One of the young bass players, Brandon Rose,
Yeah.
when I'm listening to him or watching him perform, I mean, it's to me, it looks like he kind of has an out of body experience sometimes.
Well, yeah. I mean, there are some wonderful young players,
Yes.
and it's amazing when you run into that kid who in spots sounds a little like Lester Young. I mean, it's just something. There's this old soul inside that you play all the hip stuff and then come back and just play the most soulful, ageless solo.
Yes, absolutely. You
I
know,
guess what I'm saying, that the education does help, but it doesn't guarantee you're going to be a great jazz player,
oh, absolutely.
because the element of jazz, there always has to be that unexplainable magic to it.
Hmm.
The kind of music that can make you cry or laugh.
Right. And I mean, and now, nowadays, it's kind of hit or miss with it.
Yep.
Because some of it, it's just so cookie cutter. You may hear, maybe for me anyway, I may hear like the first note or two, and I'm like, oh, that's so and so. And then, if I do like Shazam to see who it is, I'm like, oh no, that's so and so. And we've got to kind of mix it up to just keep it fresh, in order to, at least for me, to kind of
Yep.
open it up to a more broader audience. you
Well,
know
you can play a standard and just make the beat a little funky, change the groove up. You
hmm.
can play the same tune 15 nights in a row and play it totally different each night.
Right, exactly.
But you find your own feel, you find your own sound. I have found that now that I've gotten older, I've gone back to a lot of stuff I started out with when I was young,
Hmm. Right.
and I like to change things up. I can't listen to ching 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 all night.
No, no, because I would go jump off a curb if I have to listen to that all night.
It's like I'll put myself in a situation where I don't get called to do many festivals because, oh no, he might play something that's commercial in there.
Right.
So
Hmm. Right.
Back in the old days, I would call it in radio. We would call it a B-side mentality.
Hmm.
In other words, we'll play it until it becomes a hit. Then it isn't hip anymore.
So, with COVID last year and, everything shut down, how did you kind of stay, up on your music?
Well, I mean, you still practice, but didn't play any gigs.
Yeah.
Um, well, I have other interests too. So, I watched a lot of documentaries.
Okay. Hmm.
Uh, If there's a way to watch video. Sorry.
You're
Uh,
okay. No, those stinking allergies, I know.
but selective use of the tube, you can learn a whole lot of stuff.
Hmm. Right.
But I have other things that I get interested in too. I mean, I did 40 years of radio.
Hmm.
I wouldn't want to go back to that again. Or at
Why,
least
why wouldn't
not
you?
what.
I said, why wouldn't you want to go back to radio?
Well, if I can make radio like it was 20, 30 years ago, yeah. The way it is now, it's so corporate.
Okay, I was going to say, is this more of a machine?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Hmm.
Um, it's kind of funny when you find yourself doing cookie cutter production, and the cookies you're copying or something it's something you came up with 20 years ago. They just don't know it.
Right, exactly.
Uh,
Right.
I mean, I was in radio production the last 23 years,
Hmm.
and I got a closet full of MAB awards, and I even have a couple Emmys for feature writing.
Well,
We
okay.
did that over the phone in Cincinnati, believe it or not.
Oh, okay. Uh huh.
But I mean, I'm interested in a lot of different things. So if music falls down for a while, I'll find something else to do.
Right.
Music's always been there for me when radio fell apart, and radio has always been there for me when music fell apart. It seems to have worked out that way. But I'll tell you one thing: uh, a year after you leave radio, nobody remembers you.
Mm-hmm.
My experience, most people
A
don't.
year? Is it a year or less than a year?
Oh, sometimes it's less.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had the experience recently where I'll talk to somebody I haven't talked to or played with for 40 years, and 3 minutes into the conversation, it's like no time has passed. There's something very special about the jazz community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well,
It's it,
Rosetta Hines, when she was on WJZZ,
yep,
and she had kind of faded away and moved away, and now she's back. I mean, the several jazz artists that I've had the pleasure of meeting.
yeah. Well, we lost Rose last year,
Oh, okay. Okay.
uh, but I worked with. We used to when I was doing afternoons, and she'd come on after me, and
Oh, okay.
we did this thing where she'd come in an hour early on Friday, and I'd stay an hour late. So for 2 hours, we just sort of had a two-person show, and we'd joke around, and we just
Wow.
we'd have,
Yeah.
we'd have some fun. When I did mornings, the thing what I did was I did a lot of humor,
Hmm.
and the thing that was cool about doing, because most people when they do mornings on a jazz station, they don't think to do it like a normal morning show. And so what I was doing topical stories with punchlines, and then throwing a few voices every now and then,
Right.
and the thing was so cool is in upper demos I had comparable ratings to J.P. McCarthy, but he catered to the Grosse Pointe Yacht Club's set,
Exactly. Yes. Yes.
and I was coming from the liberal side, so
Yeah.
I could and on
Oh,
a
briefly.
I could tell those kind of jokes and not get in trouble.
Right. Or not offend people.
And because the way media is these days, if you're going to tell political jokes, you better be coming from the right.
Yes, exactly. And we want to stay on air, so we kind of chit chatted briefly before we came in the studio.
But there was a lot of freedom with working with with JZZ.
Mhm.
It was a great bunch of people. I mean, what really kept that station going were the people in the air because they were all dedicated.
Yes, very much so.
Cliff Coleman, one of the most dedicated. You could offer him 10 times the money to do another kind of music, and he'd turn you down.
Yeah,
Uh,
you
yeah,
wouldn't do it.
Alvin Usery, Dorian, John Hill. When I first got there, they were just wonderful people.
Yeah.
Tony Weaver. I mean,
Mhm.
it was a special place. Like I said, none of us were going to get rich,
Right.
but but
Well,
it,
not rich
but
financially, but in other ways, I think, with the friendships, that were built, during those times.
yeah, I remember Branford Marcellus invited himself. He called me on the request line one day. He says, "Hey, Swindell." I said, well, "Who is this?" This is Branford. Branford who? Branford Marcellus.
Oh,
Like,
dear.
well, like he was supposed to do an earlier shift that day,
Uh-huh.
and didn't like what he was hearing. He said, "Man," says, "and I know you. There's certain things you got to play, but I can tell when you get your opportunity to play the stuff, you playing it."
You don't play it. Right.
Well, I was kind of known for I played a lot of up tempo things. If the weather was kind of crappy, I'd slow it down a little bit. You got to read it. You got to read the air.
Right.
But anytime you're doing mornings or afternoons, you got to pick up the pace.
Oh, good Lord, yes, because I want to, if I'm driving into work, I need something to wake me up and lift my spirits.
Yeah, he's like, if it's like a rainy afternoon, but it's relaxing,
Yeah.
then you'll pull it back a little bit. You might play Maiden Voyage, you know,
Hmm. Hmm.
something that sounds good in the rain.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've got 2 minutes. What,
Okay.
what's on the agenda next for Don Swindell?
Well, let's see. My 50th high school reunion is tomorrow. That's going to be a trip.
Oh, nice.
Uh,
Okay.
I'm playing a blues festival up in Davison
Uh
on
huh.
Saturday. Wait till my band's playing in Detroit, but I hopefully I can get my band going. And by the way, in my band, Tom Starr on drums, Larry Barris on guitar, Kurt Schreitmiller on keyboards, and the great Ron Brooks on bass.
Sweet. Now, where's your band playing in Detroit?
Well, we normally play Nicola's and whatever else we can pick up, but I've got to get on the phone and start pressing some things. And you got any idea? Well, we'll get together later. You can tell
Oh
me what
yeah,
you got.
absolutely. Yeah, let's talk and see if we can't put our heads together to make something happen and
Yeah,
everything.
because I've been with these guys quite a while, and they're really wonderful musicians,
Mhm.
and everybody, and it's like a family.
Yes,
It-
absolutely.
no bad vibes.
No, we don't need them. We don't like those.
No, because it eventually kills the band. So
Yes, absolutely. Nope. Check your egos at the door.
yeah, and to tell younger people this, don't carry too many attitudes about musicians because when you get older, it's not going to matter.
Exactly.
Eventually, everybody buries the hatchet and everybody gets along.
Yeah, at some point, you hope, you would hope that happens.
Well, you're around Galen and Eileen and those people. You're around great people to begin with. So
Oh yeah, yeah. I've got some great teachers in my space, so I'm very fortunate for that. Don, thank you, thank you so much.
thank you. It's
Yep.
been
Yeah, appreciate you taking some time out of your schedule.
it's not like my dance card is full. So
And we will be in touch offline.
thank you.
Got your number now.
Yeah, I got yours too.
All right. You take care and have a good evening.
You too.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Good night.
Bye bye.